What I'm about to share is something I've never told another soul, outside of my fiancée, Bailey. And once you hear it, you'll understand why. The months leading up to this story were brutal for us. Between our demanding jobs, planning our wedding, and trying to buy a house, stress had piled up endlessly, suffocating us until even finding time to breathe, let alone enjoy each other's company, felt impossible. We needed an escape, somewhere far from deadlines, responsibilities, and the relentless grind that consumed our days. The wilderness called to us. More remote, the better. That's how we found ourselves at the ranger station on a perfect summer afternoon, oblivious that we were about to step into something. Well, something that would change both of us forever. The ranger station smelled of aged wood and stale coffee. As I leaned against the counter, scrawling the last details on the permit, Bailey adjusted the straps on her pack beside me. She was fidgeting, restless energy vibrating off her. I couldn't blame her. It was her first real backcountry trip, and we were venturing deep into grizzly country. Behind the counter, a weathered man in his 50s, Miller, his name tag read, gave me a scrutinizing look as he scanned the form. "You sure about this route?" he asked, tapping a calloused finger on the map laid out before us. His nail landed on a winding trail threading through the park's most isolated regions. "Not a lot of folks take this one. Tough terrain. This time of year it's empty. You'll be on your own out there." "That's the plan," I said with a small grin. Miller's concern didn't faze me. He was probably used to rookies stumbling in over their heads. But I wasn't one of them. His gaze shifted to Bailey. "You ever been in grizzly country before?" Her hesitation was audible. "Not exactly. I mean, I've been camping, just not like this." Miller sighed, rubbing his jaw thoughtfully. "Listen, I'm not trying to spook you, but grizzlies aren't like black bears. You surprise one, it won't bolt. It'll stand its ground or worse. This season's been unusual." "Unusual how?" I pressed. Miller studied me for a moment before shrugging. "Odd noises. Hikers feeling watched. A couple of fresh bear kills, mangled worse than what we typically see. Could be a boar grizzly moving through new territory. Just stay alert and keep that bear spray close." My hand instinctively brushed the canister strapped to my belt. Always. Though he signed the permit and handed it over, Miller's expression remained tense. "Stick to your plan," he said. "No cell service out there. If you run into trouble, you're on your own until someone checks those trails." Bailey swallowed hard but nodded. "We'll be careful." I gave Miller a firm nod, then pushed open the door. The moment we stepped outside, the air seemed heavier. Late afternoon sunlight slanted low, casting long, stretched shadows across the dirt lot. Our truck sat alone, a silent sentinel against the encroaching forest. The trailhead loomed just beyond it, dark and quiet, the trees standing like watchful sentries. Bailey exhaled, her hands tightening the straps on her pack once again. "I don't know if I should feel excited or terrified." I smirked, adjusting the machete strapped to my belt. "Both is good. Keeps you sharp." With that, we crossed the lot and stepped into the tree line. Into the wilderness. Into the unknown. The first stretch of the trail demanded respect. I had chosen this route deliberately. Steep climbs, uneven terrain, and relentless stretches without a single easy stop. It wasn't about pushing Bailey too hard, but about giving her a taste of real backcountry hiking, far removed from the cushy ease of car camping. She was holding up better than I had expected. "You okay back there?" I asked, glancing over my shoulder. Bailey exhaled sharply, shifting the straps of her pack. "Define okay." I grinned. "Regretting this yet?" She blew a strand of hair from her face and grumbled, "Ask me after I catch my breath." We'd only been hiking an hour, but the steady climb was relentless. Even with all her training, weighted walks, gym sessions, the works, nothing prepared you for the grinding reality of uneven ground, loose rocks, and a trail that seemed to climb forever. "You're doing good," I said over my shoulder. She let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "I better be. My legs feel like I'm carrying a small car." The air was crisp under the canopy, cool and slightly damp. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the trees in golden beams, though they did little to ease the burn of the steep trail. Birds chattered softly in the branches above, their calls a faint counterpoint to the muffled thud of our boots on the dirt. Somewhere to our left, water gurgled over rocks in a steady stream. Bailey adjusted her pack again. "Is it normal for my shoulders to feel like they're being torn off?" "Completely," I said. "But it goes away eventually. You get used to it." She groaned loudly. "It better." For a while, we hiked in near silence, the rhythm of our steps grounding us. The trail wound upward, carving through dense forest and narrowing as it climbed. The scent of pine was thick, mingling with the fresh tang of dirt and moss. It was the kind of silence I loved, the hum of the wilderness, vast and unbroken by the chaos of the world beyond. Bailey broke the quiet after a few minutes. "I get why you like this so much," she admitted. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "It's peaceful, like, really peaceful." I smiled, though I didn't turn around. "Told you." The trail leveled slightly as we neared a ridgeline. Bailey had adjusted well by then, her pace steadier, her breathing less labored. She wasn't struggling anymore, even on the rougher sections. "See?" I said. "Told you it gets easier." She snorted. "Easier is a strong word. Let's call it tolerable." The thinning trees signaled the ridge was near. I quickened my pace, eager for the view that awaited us. We crested the hill, stepping onto a narrow plateau. Below us stretched an endless valley, awash in the golden light of late afternoon. I opened my mouth to call Bailey forward, and froze. 10 feet ahead, a grizzly bear loomed in the center of the trail. It moved before I could react. With a low, rumbling growl, the bear rose onto its hind legs, its towering frame blotting out the fading sunlight. It was enormous, easily 10 feet tall, with shoulders like boulders and fur that gleamed a burnished mix of brown and gold. Its eyes, dark and ancient, locked onto mine. The roar that followed was primal, a bone-deep explosion of sound that reverberated through the air, shaking my chest. Bailey made a strangled noise behind me. I didn't move, didn't blink. Slowly, I stepped back, guiding Bailey behind me. My hand found hers, trembling as she clung to me. "Don't run," I said, my voice low and firm. The bear huffed, its breath visible in the cooling air. Its claws hung like curved blades at its sides, each one wickedly sharp. It stared us down, unmoving. My hand slid to the bear spray on my belt, fingers tightening around the canister. I squared my stance, making myself taller, broader, louder. "Hey!" I bellowed. "Move on!" The bear didn't so much as flinch. Bailey's grip on my arm was vice-like. "Cody!" Before she could finish, something off to our right let out a sharp snapping crack. The grizzly froze, its ears swiveling toward the sound. Another crack followed, closer this time. It was deliberate, like a thick branch splitting under immense weight. The bear huffed once, dropping down onto all fours. For a breathless moment, I thought it might charge. Then, without warning, it bolted. The massive creature crashed through the undergrowth toward the stream, its heavy footfalls fading quickly into the dense wilderness. Bailey exhaled shakily behind me, the sound of it mirroring the thunderous beat of my pulse. Neither of us moved. The forest had fallen unnaturally silent once again. Bailey's voice broke the stillness, barely above a whisper. "We need to go." I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Let's go, before it decides to come back." We edged carefully past where the bear had stood. our steps slow and measured. Each one seemed to scream in the oppressive quiet. My senses were wired, every sound amplified. As we neared the far side of the ridge, I made the mistake of looking back. There, standing where the bear had been moments before, was something else. It was taller. A dark silhouette loomed in the middle of the trail, its shoulders impossibly broad, arms hanging unnervingly long at its sides. It was completely still. My stomach twisted violently. "Bailey," I said, my voice tight. She turned, following my gaze. The moment she saw it, her hand shot out, clutching my arm in a death grip. "What is that?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. Neither of us moved. Then, without warning, the figure shifted. It took a slow, deliberate step backward, vanishing into the shadows of the trees. There wasn't a single sound. No crunch of leaves, no snap of twigs. Bailey's fingers tightened on my wrist. "Cody, what the hell was that?" I didn't know. I didn't want to know. We weren't going to stick around to find out. The next morning, the first pale light of dawn bled softly through the thin nylon of the tent, casting everything in a faint pink glow. I lay there in silence, eyes fixed on the fabric above me, unmoving. Yesterday played behind my eyes like a film stuck on loop. The trail, the silence, the bear, the thing that came after. And even in that gentle morning light, I felt it. Something had changed. I laid there, listening to the soft rustling of leaves in the early morning breeze. At first, it seemed normal. Calm. Then it hit me. It was too quiet. The usual symphony of bird song and insect chatter was absent, replaced by a hollow stillness. I unzipped the tent cautiously and peered outside. Our packs were untouched, leaning where we had left them the night before. 30 yards away, the bear hang still dangled from the tree, undisturbed. I let out a breath, relieved. Behind me, Bailey groaned, rolling over in her sleeping bag. "Ugh, too early," she mumbled. "The sun's almost up," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Time to get moving." She groaned dramatically, burying her face in her hands. "Just a couple more hours, please?" I shook my head while pulling on my boots. "Not happening. We have a long hike today." She groaned dramatically and sat up, rubbing her eyes, her hair a wild tangle. "This is cruel." "Oh, you'll survive," I said with a slight chuckle. I grabbed the stove and got water boiling for coffee. The smell helped wake Bailey up, and by the time we ate and packed everything up, the forest had finally started making noise again. Birds chirping, small critters rustling through the underbrush. It was normal. It was fine. So why did I still feel uneasy? I shook it off, adjusting my pack. "Ready?" Bailey sighed, rolling her shoulders. Yeah, let's do this." We started walking. The further we went, the further yesterday's fear seemed to fade. The forest was just a forest again. The trail was just a trail. And the thing we saw standing in the middle of it? I really didn't know, and I wasn't going to let myself go down the rabbit hole speculating. The morning air was already warm by the time we got moving, sunlight cutting through the trees in thin, golden beams. The weight of my pack sat comfortably on my shoulders, and my boots found their rhythm against the dirt trail. Bailey had started strong. She wasn't dragging like yesterday, and I could tell she was adjusting to the weight of her pack. Her steps were more confident, her breathing steady. It was a good sign. She was settling into the trip. "You good back there?" I asked over my shoulder. "Surprisingly, yeah." She gave me a small grin. "My shoulders still hate me, but I think I'm getting used to it." "See? Told you it gets easier." She scoffed. "I never said you were right. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." I chuckled and kept walking. We followed the trail as it wound through the trees, the earth sloping gently downward. To our left, the sound of the river stayed constant, flowing alongside the path even when it dipped out of sight behind thick patches of brush. Birds flitted between branches overhead, chattering at each other, and every now and then, a squirrel would dart across the trail before disappearing into the undergrowth. It felt normal. Even after what had happened yesterday, the hike just felt peaceful. Bailey must have felt it too, because after a few minutes she sighed and said, "Okay, I get it." I glanced back. "Get what?" "This." She gestured vaguely at the forest around us. "Why you like it out here? It's kinda nice." I smirked. "Told you." She shook her head. "Don't be smug about it." Too late. She rolled her eyes but smiled. The miles passed easily. We made small talk, joking about how awful the freeze-dried food was going to taste tonight, how sore we'd probably be by the time we got back. It was good. Normal. For a little while it felt like just another hiking trip. I almost let myself believe it. We had been hiking for a couple of hours when I noticed it. At first it was just a feeling, something subtle, like a change in the air. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something felt different. The birds were still chirping, the river still rushing nearby. Everything looked the same as before. But the further we walked, the heavier my gut felt. Like something was looming over us. I glanced back at Bailey. She was focused on the trail, lost in her own thoughts, her boots kicking up small puffs of dirt as she walked. She didn't seem to notice anything strange. Still, I couldn't shake it. I adjusted my pack and turned my eyes back to the trees. Nothing. But that was the thing. It felt like something was there. The woods stretched out around us, dense but not unnaturally so. Sunlight flickered between the leaves. There was no obvious movement, no shape standing in the distance. But that creeping sensation, the one that had settled between my shoulders, it was back. I swallowed and forced my mind to focus. I'd been out in the wilderness plenty of times before. Feeling watched wasn't uncommon. It was part of being in a place where you weren't the only predator around. I had dealt with mountain lions shadowing me on solo trips, had stumbled across fresh bear sign more times than I could count. But this was different. It wasn't just being watched. It was like something was waiting. I rolled my shoulders, trying to shake the tension, and took a deep breath. You're overthinking it. Still, I found myself checking the trees more often, watching for movement where there shouldn't be any. Bailey finally noticed my change in demeanor. "You okay?" she asked. I forced a small smile. "Yeah, just thinking." She raised an eyebrow. "Thinking about what?" "How much you're gonna hate me when we hit the next uphill stretch." She groaned. "You're the worst." I laughed, but the tension in my chest didn't ease. Because even as we kept walking, even as the forest around us seemed completely normal, that feeling didn't go away. We had been walking for a while, and my focus was on the rhythm of my steps, the weight of my pack, and the distant sound of the river. Bailey was a few paces behind me, breathing steadily, her boots scuffing against the dirt. Everything felt normal. Then, little by little, the background noise of the forest started to thin out. I didn't pick up on it right away. It wasn't like a switch had flipped. The shift was gradual, creeping in so slowly that my brain almost didn't register it. The distant hum of insects had faded. The birds that had been calling back and forth for most of the morning had quieted down. The wind still moved through the trees, but it felt muted, like the forest itself had grown tense. I slowed my pace. Bailey nearly bumped into me. "Cody?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I listened. The realization hit me like a weight in my chest. The woods weren't just quiet. They were waiting. I exhaled slowly through my nose, my muscles already coiling tight. This wasn't normal. The only time I'd ever felt something like this was right before we saw the grizzly yesterday. Bailey stepped up beside me. "It's like before," she murmured. She was right. I reached for the bear spray on my belt, my fingers wrapping tightly around it. My pulse had picked up, but I kept my breathing slow, measured. Something was nearby. Something big. I scanned the trees, eyes flicking between the thick trunks, searching for movement. Nothing. Bailey's hand found my wrist. Her grip was firm. A twig snapped somewhere deep in the trees. Not close, but not far either. Bailey flinched. I swallowed. My mind was screaming at me to do something, but what? We stood there, locked in place, waiting for whatever came next. And then, just as gradually as it had faded, the sounds of the forest returned. A bird chirped, then another. Then the wind carried through the branches, and it was like nothing had happened at all. Bailey let out a shaky breath. "Cody, what the hell?" I forced my fingers to unclench from the bear spray. "I don't know," I admitted. But I did know one thing. Something had been watching us. And for whatever reason, it had decided to move on. For now. We didn't talk much after that. Bailey kept close behind me, her usual sarcasm and lightheartedness gone. I knew she was shaken. Hell, I was shaken. I kept my eyes moving, scanning ahead and to the sides of the trail. Whatever had been out there was gone now, but the tight feeling in my chest hadn't disappeared. We hiked in silence for another half hour, the only sounds our footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. The trail dipped lower into a shaded valley, and the trees here were taller, their thick branches casting deep shadows. That's when the smell hit me. It was sudden and overpowering, thick, wet, and rotten. Bailey gagged behind me. "Oh my God, what is that?" I pressed my arm against my nose, trying to block out the stench. It was worse than anything I'd ever smelled on a hike. Worse than old garbage. Worse than roadkill that had been baking in the sun for days. Something was dead. I stepped forward carefully, pushing through a patch of thick brush. As soon as I cleared it, I froze. Lying just off the trail, half hidden in the undergrowth, was a mangled elk carcass. Bailey stepped up beside me, then immediately recoiled. Jesus. The elk was fresh. Too fresh. The blood was still wet, soaking dark into the dirt beneath it. But it wasn't just killed. It was torn apart. Its stomach was ripped open, exposing the glistening tangle of organs inside. One of its back legs was completely missing, the torn edges of flesh jagged and uneven. The head was twisted at a weird angle, like its neck had been snapped. I swallowed hard. This wasn't normal. I had seen bear kills before. Mountain lion kills. Wolves. Predators usually go for the softest parts first. The organs, the belly, the throat. They don't rip a leg completely off. Bailey was breathing fast. "Cody, what the hell could have done this?" I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at the ground. Just past the carcass, pressed deep into the soft dirt, was a massive footprint. It wasn't a paw print. It had toes. Bailey followed my gaze, and I felt her grip my arm. "Cody." Her voice was barely a whisper. I slowly stepped forward, crouching beside it. The print was huge, at least twice the size of my boot. Wide, deep, heavy. I reached out, hesitated, then pressed my fingers into the dirt beside it. Cold fear coiled in my gut. Bailey shook her head. "That's not a bear print." I didn't answer, because I already knew. I crouched next to the footprint, staring at it like my brain needed extra time to process what I was seeing. It was deep. Whatever made it was heavy. And it wasn't shaped like any animal track I had ever seen in the wild. 5 toes. A wide, flat sole. I pressed my fingers into the dirt next to it. The impression swallowed my hand. Twice the size of my boot. Easy. Bailey took a shaky breath. "Cody, what the hell is that?" I didn't answer right away. I was trying to come up with something that made sense. A bear? Number A, bear's paws are rounder, and even if it stood on its hind legs, the shape wouldn't be like this. A human? Not a chance. No human has feet that big. My gut twisted. I stood up, wiping my hands on my pants. I don't know. Bailey glanced at the carcass again, hugging herself. Do we tell the rangers? What if it's some kind of poacher or... Poachers don't rip legs off their kills. The words came out sharper than I intended. Bailey's mouth shut. I sighed and ran a hand through my hair. Sorry, I don't know what to make of this. She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, me neither. We both stared at the track in silence for a long moment. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, a branch snapped. Not a twig, not a squirrel rustling through the leaves. Something big. Bailey's fingers wrapped around my wrist. I turned to her, lowering my voice. We need to go. Now. She didn't argue. We moved quickly, stepping back onto the trail and putting distance between us and the carcass. I kept my hand near my bear spray, my senses on high alert. I didn't look back, because I had the overwhelming feeling that if I did, I'd see something standing there, watching us. We hiked fast, not running, not making it obvious that we were freaked out, but faster than we had been all day. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Bailey stayed close, her breathing uneven, but she didn't complain about the pace. She was just as eager to put distance between us and whatever had made that footprint. The trail wound deeper into the forest, the air warmer now that we were out of the valley. But I was cold. That weight in my chest, the one that had settled there back when the woods first went quiet. It was worse now. Something was off. I kept my ears sharp, listening. The usual sounds of the forest had returned. Birds, the occasional gust of wind shifting the leaves. But none of it felt right. I felt exposed, like eyes were drilling into my back. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Nothing. Just the trail behind us, winding between the trees. But that didn't mean we were alone. Bailey must have felt it too, because after a few minutes she whispered, "Cody?" Her voice was tight, barely more than breath. "I know," I said. You feel it too, right?" I nodded. I didn't have to explain. We were being followed. Not by another hiker. Not by some harmless animal moving through the brush. This was different. Deliberate. Something was tracking us. But the worst part? It wasn't making a sound. I had spent enough time in the wild to know how animals move. A bear crashing through the brush would be loud. A mountain lion would be quiet. But not this quiet. This was wrong. I forced myself to keep walking. Don't stop. Don't look panicked. Bailey's hand found my wrist again, her fingers cold against my skin. Her grip tightened. "Cody, what if..." A branch creaked somewhere behind us. Not a snap. Not the quick crack of a twig breaking underfoot. A long, slow creak, like something heavy shifting its weight against the trunk of a tree. Bailey sucked in a sharp breath. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see what was there. Instead, I whispered, "Keep moving." And we did. Faster. The trail curved ahead, winding between thick tree trunks. We weren't talking anymore, just walking. Fast. Bailey was close enough behind me that I could hear her breathing. Not quite panicked, but not steady either. My own pulse was drumming in my ears, my senses stretched thin, waiting, listening. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been behind us hadn't stopped. It was still there, moving when we moved, watching when we paused. The worst part? It wasn't making any noise. That didn't make sense. A bear, a mountain lion, hell, even a person, would make some sound moving through terrain like this. A misplaced step, a shift in the underbrush, the rustle of leaves. But this? Nothing. Bailey whispered, "I feel sick." I swallowed. "Just keep moving." I wasn't sure if I was saying it for her or for myself. The sun was still high, filtering through the canopy in golden beams. But the trees were thick here, the shadows stretching long across the trail. My instincts were screaming. Then, movement. I caught it out of the corner of my eye. A shape in the trees to our right. Tall, dark, moving fast. I stopped dead in my tracks. Bailey nearly crashed into me. "Cody, what?" I held up a hand, cutting her off. Slowly, I turned my head. I scanned the trees. Nothing. The space between the trunks was empty, just shifting light in endless forest. But I knew what I saw. I wasn't imagining it. Something had been there. Something big. Bailey must have noticed the way my body tensed, because her voice dropped to a whisper. "You saw something, didn't you?" I hesitated. Then, reluctantly, I nodded. Bailey didn't say anything else. She just grabbed my arm, her fingers tightening around my wrist. I forced my legs to move. "Come on," I muttered. And we kept walking. Faster now. We were moving fast. Too fast for normal hiking, but neither of us cared. The need to get away overrode everything else. Bailey's breathing had turned uneven behind me, and I wasn't much better. My legs were burning from the pace. My pack felt twice as heavy. But I didn't slow down. Then, all at once, the smell hit us. Bailey gagged so hard she stumbled. "Oh my..." She covered her nose. "What the hell is that?" It was worse than the elk carcass. Thicker, rotten. But there was something else mixed in. Something damp, earthy, like decaying leaves after a rainstorm. I pressed my arm to my nose, but it didn't help. The stench coated the inside of my mouth, clinging to the back of my throat. Bailey swallowed hard. "Cody, tell me that's just another dead animal." I didn't answer, because I knew something was wrong. I turned my head slightly, testing the air. The wind was blowing toward us, which meant the smell was coming from upwind, and that meant whatever was making it was close. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Bailey saw my expression shift. "Cody?" I grabbed her wrist. "Don't stop. Keep moving." Her eyes were wide, but she didn't argue. We pushed forward, hiking fast and not looking back. The smell stayed with us. Thick, rotten, closer. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was following us wasn't just watching anymore. It was closing in. We didn't stop until we reached the clearing. The trail opened up into a wide, flat space, a patch of land surrounded by trees on all sides. The river wasn't far, just beyond the tree line, its steady flow the only sound filling the air. It was a good place to set up camp. Or at least, it should have been. Bailey dropped her pack and bent over, hands on her knees, sucking in deep breaths. "Jesus," she muttered. "I feel like we just ran a marathon." I forced a smirk, even though my own lungs were burning. "You did good." She straightened up, pushing sweaty hair from her face. "Are we stopping here?" I hesitated. Everything in me wanted to keep moving. The feeling that had settled in my gut hadn't left. It clung to me like a second skin, heavy and unshakable. But we didn't have a choice. We couldn't hike in the dark. Bailey must have seen the look on my face because she frowned. "Cody?" I exhaled. "Yeah, this is good." I wasn't sure if I believed it. She nodded, already pulling the tent from her pack. I helped her set it up, working fast, trying to focus on the routine instead of the knot in my stomach. We got the bear bag strung up in a tree about 30 yards from camp, making sure all the food and trash were secure. The sun was already sinking behind the trees, the light bleeding into deep oranges and purples. Bailey stood back, stretching her arms. "Okay, I'm starving." I didn't feel hungry, but I forced myself to grab my stove, setting it up on a flat rock. Bailey sat on a log nearby, rubbing her calves. "At least it's pretty," she said, glancing at the sunset. I nodded. "Yeah." But I wasn't looking at the sky. I was looking at the trees. The shadows were getting longer. The spaces between the trunks were darkening. And even though I couldn't see anything, I still felt it. Watching. Waiting. The food tasted like nothing. I barely noticed the warm, mushy texture of my beef stroganoff as I shoveled it into my mouth, forcing myself to eat. I wasn't hungry. Not really. But I knew I needed the calories. Bailey, on the other hand, was devouring her meal like she hadn't eaten in days. She let out a small, satisfied groan. "God, I don't even care that this tastes like cardboard. I needed this." I gave her a half smile. "Told you the hunger would kick in eventually." She rolled her eyes but kept eating. The air had cooled slightly now that the sun was gone. The sky was dark, a deep, endless black stretching over us. The only light came from my headlamp and the dim glow of the camp stove. The forest should have been alive with sound, but it wasn't. I kept waiting for the usual nighttime chorus: crickets, owls, the rustle of nocturnal animals moving through the brush. But there was nothing. Just the low murmur of the river beyond the trees. I felt Bailey glance at me. "You're doing that thing again," she said. I blinked. "What thing?" "The thing where you get all quiet and stare into the trees like a horror movie protagonist." I snorted, shaking my head. "I'm just listening." "To what?" "That's the problem," I muttered. "Nothing." Bailey frowned, chewing slowly. I could see the realization settle in her face, the unnatural stillness. I could tell she wanted to say something to make it feel normal, but she couldn't, because we both knew this wasn't normal. After a moment, she sighed. "Okay. Nope. I'm not doing this." She stood up and grabbed my portable speaker from my pack. I raised an eyebrow. "What are you—" Before I could finish, she powered it on and started flipping through songs. Music suddenly filled the air, the tinny sound bouncing off the trees. Bailey sat back down, dramatically stretching her arms. "Much better." I smirked. "You think playing music is going to make the weird vibes go away?" "Yup." She popped the pea and took another bite of food. "And if there's something out there, maybe it hates my music taste and decides to leave." I chuckled. That's one way to do it. The music helped, at least for a little while. The tension in my chest loosened, just enough for me to focus on eating. Bailey hummed along to the song, tapping her fingers against her knee. For a few minutes, it felt normal. But deep down, I knew the silence wasn't gone. It was just waiting. I lay on my back, eyes open. Bailey was already asleep, her breathing steady beside me. I had been trying to do the same, but something wasn't letting me. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Deliberate. Moving just outside the tent. I froze, every muscle locking up. Bailey shifted slightly in her sleep, mumbling, but she hadn't heard it. The steps stopped. A pause. Then, A deep exhale. Right next to the tent. I clenched my jaw. It's the bear. It had followed us. Then, a brush. Something dragged along the fabric, pressing in slightly. Bailey inhaled sharply, waking up. She didn't move, but I felt her stiffen. The tent shifted again. Something was out there, and it knew we were inside. Neither of us moved. Bailey's breathing was shallow, almost non-existent. Outside, something shifted. Slow, heavy steps circled the tent, pressing into the dirt. I clenched my jaw. The bear. It had followed us. This whole time. Every time the woods had gone quiet. Every time we had felt watched. It had never left. It had just been waiting. Now it was here. A deep huff sounded right next to my head. The tent bulged inward, a massive weight pressing against the fabric. Sniffing. Testing. Bailey's fingers dug into my arm. I could feel her shaking. The bear shifted again, its hot breath pushing into the tent. I could hear the damp sound of its nose dragging across the material, searching. It knew we were inside, and it wasn't leaving this time. Bailey barely whispered, "Cody." I didn't answer, didn't move, because I knew one thing for sure. This bear wasn't just curious anymore. It was ready to finish what it started. The bear didn't move away. It lingered. Its weight pressed against the side of the tent, the fabric stretching inward, bowing under its sheer size. A wall of muscle and fur, inches away. I could hear its slow, heavy breaths, dragging through its nostrils in deep, deliberate pulls. Smelling us. It knew we were inside. Bailey's fingers dug into my arm, ice cold against my skin. I could feel her shaking. The bear let out a long, wet huff. Its nose dragged across the fabric, sniffing, testing. The heat of its breath pushed through the thin material, brushing against my face. Then, it moved. The weight lifted from one side of the tent, and a deep thump landed on the other. Circling. The bear's shadow shifted through the fabric, massive, hulking, blocking out what little light remained. A low vibration rumbled from its chest, a sound of patience. It was waiting for something. Waiting for us to move. Waiting for an excuse. Bailey's breath hitched as the bear let out another slow, guttural exhale. Then, the tent exploded inward. A deep, snarling roar tore through the night, so close it rattled my skull. Before I could react, the wall beside me split open. The bear's claws ripped through the fabric like paper, shredding the nylon in one monstrous swipe. Bailey screamed. The whole tent lurched sideways as the bear slammed its body against it. The metal poles bent with a sharp, warping snap, collapsing the structure onto us. I barely had time to roll as a second swipe came down. The air filled with the sound of tearing fabric, tearing ground. As the bear's claws dug into the dirt just inches from my legs, it was inside. Not fully, but enough. I saw a flash of fur, claws, and teeth as the massive head shoved through the torn opening, snapping and snarling. Its breath was hot, rancid, filling the small, crumpled space around us. Bailey was sobbing, trying to crawl away, but there was nowhere to go. The bear let out another ear-splitting roar, so loud it vibrated through my chest. Then, it lunged. The bear lunged. Its massive frame slammed into the shredded tent, claws swiping wildly. I shoved Bailey forward, trying to reach the opening, trying to get out. The ground shook as the grizzly let out a snarling, guttural roar. Then, something else roared back. Not an echo, not another bear, something deep, unnatural, powerful. The grizzly froze. For the first time, it wasn't the predator. It was the prey. Bailey barely had time to scream when the bear let out a hideous, high-pitched yelp. And then it was yanked violently backward. Not running, not retreating. Something ripped it off the ground by its hind legs and dragged it into the darkness. The bear let out another shrieking howl, its claws tearing trenches into the dirt as it was pulled away. Then, the battle began. A brutal, earth-shaking collision. Branches snapped like gunfire. The ground trembled under inhuman snarls, the sounds of impact, of something massive slamming into trees, into flesh. The grizzly screamed. A sound that didn't belong to the king of the forest. A sound of pure fear. Bailey was crying now, silent, desperate not to attract attention. I grabbed her wrist, heart hammering. We had to go. We bolted, tearing away from the camp, crashing through the underbrush. We needed height. We needed cover. I spotted a broad, sturdy tree and grabbed the lowest branch, hoisting myself up, Bailey scrambling after me. We climbed, fast, not stopping until we were high enough to disappear into the canopy. Then we just held on and waited. The fight below continued, but we didn't dare look, didn't dare breathe, because whatever was out there was worse than the bear. We stayed in the tree all night, not speaking, not moving. The sounds of the battle had stopped hours ago, but we never heard anything leave. No retreating footsteps, no final growls, just nothing. The forest was dead silent. No birds, no insects, no wind through the branches, like the whole world had been reset. We waited until the first light of dawn cut through the canopy before moving. Bailey shifted beside me, her joints stiff. She wiped at her face, eyes red from silent crying. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. We both knew we needed to get out. Slowly, carefully, we climbed down from the tree. The campsite was destroyed. The tent was a shredded pile of fabric, flattened into the dirt. Deep gouges cut through the ground, like something massive had been thrown. But the rest of our gear? Untouched. Bailey grabbed her pack, slinging it over her shoulder with shaking hands. Let's go. I didn't argue. We left fast. We didn't talk. We didn't look back. We just hiked. Fast. We were maybe half a mile from the site when we saw it. The grizzly. Bailey gasped. Oh my God. We stopped dead. The bear was lying twisted and broken across the trail, torn in half. Not eaten, not scavenged. Just ripped apart. Its mouth hung open, the lower jaw snapped and torn asunder, as if something had gripped its face and pulled. I felt sick. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. Bailey clamped a hand over her mouth, shaking her head. Cody, what did that? I didn't answer, because I had no idea. I just knew we had to keep moving. So we did. Faster. We didn't stop. Not to process what we had seen. Not to rest. We just moved. Bailey was ahead of me now, which never happened. She had been struggling to keep up the first 2 days, but now, fear had given her speed. I couldn't blame her. The image of the grizzly was burned into my brain, torn apart like it was nothing. Nothing should be able to do that. And yet, something had. Something out here. I adjusted my pack and pushed harder, matching Bailey's pace. We weren't running, but we were close to it. The sun climbed higher, heating the forest floor. The trees stretched endlessly ahead, the same twisting trail, the same endless green. I checked my watch. Midday. We had been hiking for hours, only stopping for water. The weight of exhaustion dragged at my legs, but I ignored it. Bailey finally spoke, her voice hoarse from hours of silence. How much farther? I licked my dry lips. Couple more miles, I think. She nodded, didn't slow down. Neither of us looked behind us. Neither of us dared. We walked until the sky started to darken, the light fading through the trees. The air cooled. The trail ahead sloped downward. Then I recognized it. Bailey did too because she let out a shaky breath. "We're back," she whispered. The spot where we had first seen the grizzly, where everything had started. I glanced at the shadows stretching around us. Night was coming. We were close, but not out yet. We didn't stop. Not this close. Bailey switched on her headlamp, the harsh beam cutting through the dark. I flicked mine on too, the twin lights bouncing over the trail ahead. Our truck wasn't far now, a couple miles at most. We could make it. We had to. Another 50 yards, another 50 after that. Then, a howl. Not from a wolf, not from any known animal. Something else. It split through the night, raw and guttural, shaking the air, vibrating through my chest. Bailey froze. I turned, pulse hammering. The light from my headlamp swept over the trail behind us, and that's when I saw it. The figure, standing exactly where it had before, unmoved, unchanged, waiting. Bailey sucked in a breath. The light caught its face, clear this time. Not like the Patterson-Gimlin film, not a shadowy blur. This was something else. Savage, massive, battle-scarred. It stood nearly 9 feet tall, its frame incredibly wide, impossibly thick with muscle. Not just big, monstrous. The fur, dark and coarse, stretched over a body that seemed too strong for nature itself. The muscle beneath it wasn't just large, it was shifting, rippling with every slow breath, as if constantly tightening and loosening, as if barely contained beneath the skin. Its arms hung long at its sides, the hands enormous, fingers curled slightly like they could crush a skull without effort. And the face, not human, not fully animal. The brow was heavy, furrowing over deep-set, gleaming eyes that burned with intelligence. Scars crisscrossed its muzzle-like jaw, the flesh twisted in old battle wounds. It had fought before, and it had won. Bailey's fingers dug into my arm. We couldn't move. We couldn't breathe. Then, another howl. Louder, stronger, more commanding. The sound ripped through the trees, shaking the air. Then, more howls, but not close. Far away. Echoing through the mountains, coming from miles beyond the trees. Bailey's grip tightened. We weren't being hunted. We were being acknowledged. The creature watched us for a long moment. Then, it turned. And without another sound, it walked into the trees. Gone. Like it had never been there. We didn't wait. Didn't speak. We hurried out of there. Faster than before. We didn't run. Not because we didn't want to. Because we didn't dare. Bailey stayed just behind me, her breathing sharp, uneven. My legs burned, but I didn't stop, didn't slow down. Every step felt like a countdown. Just a little further, just a little more. The truck was close now. I could feel it. The only sound was the crunch of our boots against the dirt. The forest around us was still, too still. The creature was gone, but the weight of its presence hadn't left. Bailey finally whispered, "Cody." Her voice was small, uncertain. I didn't answer. I just kept moving. I think she understood. This wasn't the time for questions. We weren't safe yet. Not until we were out. Not until we were miles away from this place. The trail sloped downward, the familiar terrain finally coming into focus. I recognized the ridges, the bend in the trees. We were close. Bailey's pace picked up, her footsteps moving faster. And then, through the trees, the road. I saw it first. Bailey saw it next. A breath hitched in her throat, half a sob, half a laugh. Oh my God. Then, The truck, right where we had left it. We moved faster. Not running, but almost. The second we reached the truck, Bailey yanked the door open and climbed inside. I was right behind her. No hesitation, no checking the packs, no second thoughts. Just get in and go. My hands were shaking as I jammed the key into the ignition. The truck rumbled to life. I threw it into reverse, my foot slamming the gas harder than I meant to. The tires spun against the dirt for half a second before catching. Then, we were moving. I didn't look in the mirrors, didn't check the tree line. I didn't want to see if anything was watching. Bailey had her knees pulled up to her chest, silent. Neither of us spoke. Not a word. Not even when we hit the main road. Not even when we passed the ranger station. Not even when the miles stretched behind us, putting the forest far, far away. Only when the first signs of town appeared in the distance did Bailey let out a shaky breath. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "Cody," she whispered. I tightened my grip on the wheel. "I know," I said. And that was the last thing we said about it for the rest of the drive. I never told anyone. Not my family. Not my friends. Bailey and I still talk about it sometimes, but never in public, never around other people. We don't even say the word. But sometimes late at night I sit with my laptop open, staring at a blank screen, reliving every second of that trip. And eventually, I start typing. Not for attention, not for sympathy, not even to be believed. I just need it to exist somewhere. I type about the grizzly, how it stalked us, how it should have killed us, how something else, something bigger, something stronger, ripped it into the dark and tore it in half. I type about the howls, the ones that weren't from a wolf, weren't from any animal I've ever known. How the creature stood there watching us, making its presence known. How the other howls answered from miles away. And I type about Bailey's theory. For a long time she wanted to believe it was protecting us, that it was watching over us, stepping in like some kind of guardian. And as sweet of a sentiment as that is, I told her I don't think that's what happened. We didn't just run into it. We walked into its territory. And we weren't alone. We brought the grizzly with us. It tried to scare us both off. The silence in the forest, the strange feeling of being watched, the unease we kept brushing aside. But we were too dumb to realize it. So it had to step in. Not because it cared about us, not because we were worth saving, but because dead humans were bad for everybody. A missing hiker, a dead backpacker, that meant rangers, search teams, more people, more attention, and creatures like that. Things that live in the shadows, things that avoid human contact. They can't afford that. So it killed the grizzly. Not to protect us, to protect itself. And when we finally made it out, when we reached the edge of its land, that final howl, that wasn't a farewell. That was a warning. Don't come back. And I won't. Thinking. Not about what happened. I've already replayed it 1,000 times. Not about what we saw, but about what we didn't see. The creature didn't want humans in its territory. It had no reason to help us, only to keep us from becoming a bigger problem. So if that's true, how many other people have stumbled into its land and never made it out? How many missing hikers, lost backpackers? How many of those cases never had a real explanation? How many were like us, but just a little too slow? A little too far from their truck? A little too deep in the woods where no one would ever find them? A chill crept up my spine. I don't want to know the answer. And I'm sure as hell never going back to find out.